Over the last year or so, I've gotten a lot of questions from people asking me how much it costs to 6-speed swap my Forester, or asking me how much it costs to do the full STI swap on my Forester. And I wish I could give you a simple answer. I wish there was a dollar amount that I could tell you for exactly how much it costs to do this swap. But unfortunately, it's not that simple. There's a lot of different parts involved in a swap like this, and there's a lot of different variables. For example, do you want to go with the 5x114 lug pattern? Do you want to go with the R180 rear diff? A 2015 steering rack, or do you want a lot of aftermarket parts or China State OEM? Now I took this Forester up to Gaithersburg, Maryland to Androtech Automotive, and I had them do a lot of labor work on this build. I'm going to exclude any of those costs from this video because if you're watching this video, you're probably a savvy individual who's planning on doing this swap yourselves. So I'm going to exclude the labor costs. Also, I've got a lot of sponsorships on this build, so the actual price of how much I paid is not necessarily indicative of what you would pay. Now I could list the used prices on the used markets, but that also varies from day to day. So in order to make this video as accurate and informative as possible to you guys, I'm going to list the MSRP price of every single part that I put on this Subaru Forester. Let's get started. We'll start where I started. The first thing that I did was put on a Koyarad all-aluminum radiator. I want to make sure that the engine stays cool and reliable. Then I went to JSpec Auto and bought their full 6-speed swap with 60,000 miles on it. This included the 6-speed transmission, Brembo brakes, subframes, axles, drive shaft, 5x114 hubs, and R180 rear diff. This was about $4,500. As part of the swap, I wanted to put in the 2015 STI steering rack, since it's got a much tighter ratio and has a much more direct steering feel. This set me back $902 since I bought it brand new. We also put in the White Line roll center kit while I was in there, and the Cartboy front and rear end links. We then put in the CNC'd rear diff cover to keep the rear diff fluid temperatures cool and increase the fluid capacity. This was about $650. We changed the brake lines for some stainless steel lines, and obviously a new clutch and flywheel. Then, since my hubs were changed over for a 5x114 lug pattern, I put on some 2005 STI wheels and mounted them with Firestone Indy 500 tires. We're now up to $8,638 for the 6-speed swap. Now, obviously, a lot of these parts are not required to do this swap. You could get away with doing a lot of this for probably half the cost, but you'd probably be cutting a lot of corners. Now it was time to add some reliable bolt-on power. I got everything Cobb: downpipe, uppipe, short shifter and knob, intake, battery tie-down and oil cap, heat shield, WeatherTech mats, and the Holy Access port. I also put on a Turbo XS catback. I then wanted the car to look a little bit better than the stock grandma appearance. So I went with all of the JDM Forester STI and Sports bumpers. I also went with a brand new and freshly painted JDM rear spoiler. To make the interior more comfortable, I put in some fancy speakers, a navigation head unit, version 9 STI steering wheel, Forester STI gauge cluster, JDM Forester cup holder trim, and finished it all off with some new window gussets. There's also a few things that I did off camera that you haven't seen in these videos. For example, the silicone intercooler hoses, Perrin inlet pipe, the Thule roof box, and the IEG T2V deletes. So now the total is up to $16,263, just after the first 2 build episodes on this Forester. Now again, this is MSRP pricing, so this is everything brand new. You could obviously get away with doing this for a little bit cheaper if you bought things on the used market, maybe between $10,000 to $12,000. It was at that point that we went on our elaborate Florida to Alaska road trip. And after the road trip and daily driving it for another 20,000 miles, I started to have a fuel line leak. So I decided to tear back into this car for some power mods. The first thing was to fix my fuel leak with some vibrant AN lines. Changing out the fuel lines for AN lines meant I also needed fuel rails, so I might as well put on the Flex Fuel Kit from Cobb. And if I'm running E85, I might as well change out the turbo for the new 2015 STI Turbo. My Forester was now making 326 wheel horsepower and 371 foot-pounds of torque, which then naturally it blew up, as all Subarus do, which means it's time for a built engine. Androtech Automotive and Turbo XS hooked me up with Manley H-Tough rods and Manley Platinum Series pistons. I put on a Killer Bee baffled oil pan setup and a Cobb air oil separator to keep the engine reliable. A lot of the cost of a built motor is in the labor, but staying consistent with just listing parts cost, the engine build was up to $4,280. With the built engine in the car, we could now turn up the boost a little bit. At 21 psi, the car was now making 327 wheel horsepower and 402 foot-pounds of torque. After I put the built engine in, I wanted to take the Forester to the track, which means I needed to do a couple more things. Grimspeed top-mount intercooler, Fortunato 500 coilovers with Swiss springs and pillow ball mounts, and an extra set of wheels, the same BBSs, and some Nitto NT01 tires. Also, we had to throw on some more race-friendly brake pads. Well, there you have it. The total price is quite ridiculous. I agree. But now you can see why it's so hard for me to answer the question of how much it costs to STI swap my Subaru Forester. Now keep in mind that all of these prices are MSRP pricing. I've heard of people doing a swap like this for as little as $10,000, but they're also cutting a lot of corners. Now don't forget, I'm excluding any labor costs in this build. I'm also excluding the cost of buying the Forester in the first place. I bought this Forester about 2 years ago for $5,500 from a lovely little grandma who kept all of her Subaru service records. So if you're keeping track, that's a total of about $34,000 for what you see in front of you. And if you've done your research, you would know that $34,000 is about how much it costs for a base model, brand new STI. So would you rather have a brand new STI or would you rather have this Forester? I'm gonna leave that up to you. Now, sure, a brand new STI doesn't have the same amount of power as my Forester, and it definitely doesn't have as much interior space, but it's a heck of a lot newer and nicer, and it definitely has a higher resale value. I didn't make this video to tell you to STI swap a Forester. If anything, it's the opposite. My best hope is that you can walk away from this knowing what you're getting into if you're planning to do a swap like this yourself. I hope this video helps you plan out your build, or maybe it helped you realize that you'd rather just buy a brand new STI. Either way, I appreciate you watching. If you're interested in more information about this Forester or to see more about what I've done to it, I've got about 6 or 7 other videos on this channel, over an hour worth of content just on this Forester. So stick around, definitely subscribe, hit the notification bell and all that. Also, if you're interested in what I'm gonna do to the Forester in the future, follow us on Instagram because I post a lot more up-to-date stuff on what's going on with this Forester there. It's also just a lot easier for me to post on Instagram, so I do a lot of that there. But either way, thank you for watching and have a great day.